We start this hour in Europe, and the Russian Defense Ministry reported that Russian troops had captured two key villages in eastern Ukraine. The first, Dvorichanske, is located in the Kharkiv region, where soldiers were seen raising the Russian flag over a heavily damaged building. The location was confirmed through satellite imagery, although the exact date of the video couldn't be independently verified. The second, Hai, located in the Dnipropetrovsk region, was also claimed by Russian forces on the same day. Satellite imagery matched the features of the location, but again, the precise date of the video could not be confirmed. Since late June, Russian forces have expanded their control in both Dnipropetrovsk and neighbouring Zaporozhye regions, marking significant advances, with reports indicating that they have moved forward by at least 30 kilometres in recent weeks. Joining us now is Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russia affairs expert and he joins us live from Brussels. Gilbert, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Gilbert, Russia says it's advancing in both Dnipropetrovsk and in Kharkiv. From your vantage point, is this genuine momentum here by Moscow's forces?
Oh, it is momentum, but the notion that the war will end in 3 weeks with a Russian victory is utter nonsense. Of course, anything can happen, but a political collapse in Ukraine cannot be dismissed, considering the scandalous goings-on, political repercussions of the bribery, of the corruption that has been found in the midst of the Kiev government. However, looking strictly at the military, Russia has a long way to go before it reaches the Dnieper River, which more or less divides the country into 60% West Ukraine and 40% East Ukraine, not to mention taking the whole country. So the notion of a Russian all-out victory coming from these incremental gains of a settlement here and a settlement there is not obvious or persuasive. Looking at the two different locations that you've mentioned, Dnipropetrovsk, which is farther to the west, and Kharkiv, which is right on the border with Russia. I would say that for the Russian purposes of ensuring their own security, or any settlement comes out of this war, the gains in Kharkov Oblast are much more important. Kharkov was used as a staging ground for the incursions in two Russian border areas. Kursk, of course, is the best known of these, going back to August of last year. Now, so for Russia to take in hand Kharkiv Oblast or province is a security issue of the first importance, and therefore they are very keen to stress their gains. Let us remember that Kharkiv, that is the city of the city for which the province has the same name, Kharkiv city is the second largest city in Ukraine. It also is basically a Russian-speaking city. So the Russian armed forces are being very cautious in the way they are taking over this oblast and hoping to subjugate the city. They don't want to cause extensive civilian casualties, because the civilians who would suffer are basically Russian speakers.
Gilbert, I also wanted to get your reaction to the diplomatic developments today, mainly being the one that Ukraine will obtain up to 100 French-made Rafale warplanes over the next 10 years under a deal signed today. Also, of course, in the deal are air defense systems, munitions and drones, which were signed into in a letter of intent by Zelensky and Macron. Going into the winter months, is this going to make any difference to Ukraine's war effort?
In terms of morale, yes. In terms of actual military improvement of the situation, of course, no. 10 years is a long time for delivery of these Rafales, and who knows what kind of Ukraine will exist 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, not to mention 10 years from now. But in the terms of morale and the evident support, I would say desperate support of Western European countries for Ukraine and for Mr. Zelensky's regime, this is, of course, significant, as significant in his own way as the deal which Mr. Zelensky reached over the weekend with his Greek counterparts for supply of natural gas So that is essentially liquefied natural gas coming from the United States through a northern corridor from Greece up into Ukraine, so that Ukraine will have some supply of gas after Russia has virtually destroyed its own gas production.
Yes, Gilbert, Dr. O, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of Europe. Finland's President Alexander Stubb has expressed hope that European Union leaders will find solutions to address Belgium's concerns over using frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine. During a joint press conference with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Stubb said he plans to meet with Belgium's Prime Minister Bart De Wever. Let's listen in to what Stubb has said.
When it comes to funding Ukraine, it seems rather clear that there are three options. The first one is that EU member states, or NATO member states for that matter, pay directly, either by taking more loans or using current reserves. The second option is the mutualization of debt on a European level, as was done with Next Generation Europe and with SAFE. And the third option, of course, is the use of the immobilized assets. I will discuss these matters today with Belgium's Prime Minister. I think a lot of European leaders have understood the concerns that Belgium has in this situation, both political and legal. And I hope that when leaders start moving towards the European Council of December, that solutions will be found, because it is of utmost importance that we continue to fund Ukraine in its fight for its existence and survival.
Gilbert joins us from Brussels. Gilbert, Belgium is blocking the EU's plan to use these frozen Russian assets. What is Belgium concerned about? Legal fallout, Russian retaliation, or economic exposure?
All three. The points that Mr. Stubb was making were precisely repeating remarks made by Ursula von der Leyen a week ago. This was not his speech. He took up her speech and made it his own. Considering the news that we've discussed a couple of minutes ago, the question of what happens to Russian frozen assets that are in Euroclear in Belgium, whether they can be used in one way or another to provide funding for the war effort in Ukraine over the next 2 years, that is of cardinal importance. Frankly speaking, as it looks now, if Mr. De Wever, the Prime Minister of Belgium, cannot be persuaded that his European colleagues are standing by him and will share the risks that Belgium faces, if that does not happen, then I think a collapse of the Ukrainian war effort is predictable in the foreseeable future, meaning the next 6 months, shall we say, because Rafale aircraft from France will do no good if the Ukrainian army is not being paid because there's no money. And that is a situation. The country is desperately in need of funds. Europe doesn't have the money. Looking at the three options that Mr. Stubb mentioned, Europe does not have the money, the reserves to make available to Russia. Its only easy solution is confiscating, essentially stealing, the Russian assets that are now parked in Euroclear under sanctions. Belgium's Prime Minister is unlike the other 26 European member states, or at least 25 of them, in that he is genuinely concerned with the welfare of his country and not with ideology. He is a nationalist. He is a pocketbook nationalist, not an ethnic nationalist. And that tells you the whole story. He's concerned about the welfare, the economic prosperity of Belgium, and a case of taking 140 billion euros of Russian assets that are now in Belgian hands and giving them over to Ukraine would put Belgium in every possible liability, legal liability, and a possible military response from Russia. I am told by Flemish journalists that Mr. De Wever is shaking in his boots. he also knows about Russian Oreshniks, and he wouldn't like to see them headed for Brussels.
Yes, Gilbert, of course, as you've said, the European Union is made up of 27 countries, all with different governments. If the EU can't agree internally on how to use Moscow's frozen funds, does that signal weakening political will behind Ukraine?
Absolutely. The game will be up. The game will be up not on the battlefield, because despite all the cheerleading by so many visible people in the alternative media in the West, the reality is that victory on the battlefield for the Russians is not going to happen tomorrow, as I've made plain earlier. The political collapse of Ukraine is far more probable. If there's no money to pay the officials in the army, the country will collapse. And if Europe cannot mobilize behind Mr. De Wever and behind Belgium to ensure that his country alone will not be exposed to Russian vengeance, then the game is up.
Yeah, and do you believe that Russia would retaliate if the EU ultimately transfers revenue from frozen assets to Ukraine? Many critics say this is against international law.
Oh, it isn't against international law. As Mr. De Wever himself said in his speech 2 weeks ago, in which he refused to go along with the pressure of his colleagues, even in World War II, there was no effort to confiscate the state assets of the belligerent countries. Therefore, for Europe now to do that to Russian assets, as is being discussed and as is being prioritized by von der Leyen, is a precedent, a very dangerous precedent. Normally, confiscation of state assets is possible only in a state of war. That's international law.
Yes, Gilbert Doctorow, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World, and thank you for taking the time. We now move on, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed his gratitude as he and French President Emmanuel Macron signed an accord in Paris, calling the agreement a historic one. According to the agreement, Ukraine will be purchasing around 100 Rafale jets, as well as anti-air defences and drones from France, providing a crucial boost to Ukraine's war effort amid Russian attacks and recent battlefield setbacks. Zelensky, after signing the letter of intent with French President Emmanuel Macron at the Villa Coublay Air Force Base in southwest of Paris, says that they will have the greatest air defense system with President Macron's help. Meanwhile, Macron says that some of the deliveries of drones, interceptor drones and guided bombs would come in the very short term, with manufacturing commitments made for the coming 3 years. Let's listen in to President Zelensky.
Україна зможе отримати 100 літаків Rafale F-4, дуже сильні французькі радари, 8 систем протиповітряної оборони, самці, по 6 пускових. Ну це деталі, напевно, це для когось технічні деталі, а для нас це важливо. Кожна пускова, все це захист кожного життя. Це дуже важливо. Необхідні для нашого захисту ракети та керовані. Це стратегічна домовленість, яка працюватиме 10 років від наступного року. Ми розуміємо всі основи цієї домовленості. Політичні, фінансові, промислові. Це історична угода. Дуже цінно, що Франція робить такий крок для досягнення реальної гарантованої безпеки в Європі. Є сильний пакет оборони, підтримки України, є Рафалі, і тут це, я впевнений, історичне рішення. А що нас можна посилювати? Я вам скажу, що це дуже серйозний флот, який будуємо ми для України. Ми говоримо про нове покоління самці. Ми працюємо з самці, дякую Еммануелю. І нове покоління – це дуже серйозний рівень. Ви знаєте, що ми працюємо з патріотами проти балістики. Новий рівень самці – це проти.
We move on, and China says that it has made progress in